This episode of TWA is brought to you by Campfire Blaze.
Welcome to the revolution, comrades. I will abide by the tyranny of the evil empire's dominion of storytelling no longer. Unite under the flag of freedom. Throw off the yoke of oppressive creativity and join the well-worn and veteran tropes of the resistance. The revolution begins now. Let terrible writing advice indoctrinate. Inspire writers to revolt and create their very own rebellion to put a stop to the evil empire's tyranny. The first thing to remember when it comes to writing fictional rebel groups is that they are defined primarily by not being very clearly defined. Fictional rebellions are all about fighting for freedom against oppression by an evil empire. Rebels don't need things like an ideology, identity, or cause beyond the vague notion of fighting for freedom and stopping the evil empire. Is this critical lack of world building a direct result of my creative bankruptcy and slothful storytelling technique? Well, yes, but in this case it also serves a practical purpose, namely not accidentally making a political statement and thus lose out on potential audience members who might be alienated by the stark nature of more accurate representations of rebellions. Which I definitely don't want to stumble into, because we all know that historic rebellions had nothing to do with politics. I mean, we have a group of people trying to overthrow an established government through use of violence. What's political about that? By keeping the rebels free of any messy world building, this helps me sidestep things that might make the rebels look like bad guys. Things like having an extremist ideology, a fundamentalist religion, being built entirely around a cult of personality, being an actual cult, just straight up being terrorist, being led by an authoritarian strongman, being led by a delusional charismatic authoritarian strongman, or all of these at once for an extra spicy rebellion. And while we are on the subject, a writer should probably also avoid the whole reign of terror thing that revolutions sometimes have. We are here to lionize the rebels and romanticize the idea of revolution, not dive down into the messy reality of rebellions, no matter how much conflict the story loses out on. Why use the negative aspects of rebel groups as a way to drive conflict when I can instead drive conflict out of the story? How do the rebels navigate the fine line between ideology and practicality? Do they compromise their ideals for the sake of a quick victory? Is it right to use terror to fight the evil empire's rule of fear? Complex questions of morality in times of war and chaos? Nah, rebels good, empire bad. All of those shades of gray will be burned away in the rebellion's totally justified and most definitely not brutal purges. It's a stark moral binary from here on out, which, come to think of it, is something a lot of real rebel groups have that make them come across as unhinged when viewed from the outside. But in this case, it's okay, because the author said so. Now, who will join my entirely noble rebellion? Why, my fictional rebellion is made up of people from all walks of life. So long as those walks are all roughly middle-class everymen. Poor, oppressed, and downtrodden people with little to no education, prospects, or hopes that can be easily radicalized? No thanks. The revolution is many things, but it can afford to be a bit picky. My revolution fights for the rights of the oppressed. You know, so long as those oppressed don't try to touch me with their dirty little fingers. Just because my revolution will champion the rights of minorities doesn't mean that it has to actually bother to interact with them in any way. Besides, if I have a rebellion made up of diverse groups with differing backgrounds, objectives, perspectives, and cultures, I might end up with a dynamic organization full of engaging internal conflict as the rebels have to balance the needs of various internal factions while still effectively resisting the evil empire. Why would I want a dogmatic evil empire that forces a uniformity of identity in its citizens to be thematically opposed by a rebellion that embraces a wide array of perspectives and practices? Why would a writer bother to flesh out the rebellion's rebels when they're going to be killed to a man during the first fight with the evil empire anyway? Freedom isn't earned by everyone working together to find a better vision for the future. No. Freedom is given by a small elite group of special people chosen by destiny, and the rest of us can just die so the super special main characters can look cool during the story's climax. Next thing you'll be telling me is that the revolution needs a plan. The revolution waits for no plan. Zeal will substitute for any amount of planning and preparation. Campaigns are not won through strategy and logistics, but with suicidal zealotry. Wait, did I just turn my rebellion into a suicidal death cult? Whoops, looks like I accidentally made my rebellion a little too realistic. That's okay, I'll just ignore that one. Come to think of it, zealotry isn't probably the best way to put it. How about plucky or ragtag? Yeah, plucky ragtag rebels sounds a lot better than extremist suicide bomber insurgents, since I'm trying to sell the whole rebels are always the good guys thing. Any rebels that try to form a plan should be portrayed as incompetent and are simply jealous of the main character's saccharine speeches about freedom and hope. Having the rebels execute a plan and then have to adapt to battlefield conditions would only add unnecessary tension and context to the action scenes. Battles in fiction are just glorified fireworks displays anyway, not a life and death struggle of strength and wits. Even worse, having the rebels execute a solid battle strategy might steal the spotlight away from the precious main characters. Besides, I can always avoid that by stubbornly refusing to address just how the rebels are organized. Do the rebels use a cell structure to prevent the whole of their organization from being compromised? Do they instead use a strict chain of command more akin to an organized army? Where do they get their supplies from? Do rival powers to the evil empire funnel the rebels' weapons and equipment in secret? Do they have a uniform, or do they instead blend in with the civilian population? Is there a rallying symbol that the rebels use to represent themselves? If the rebels constantly die in droves to the Imperial Death Troopers, then how do they replenish their numbers? These very basic questions do nothing but sap creative energy away from more important things, like what last words will the rebel leader give the main character right before the Imperial Death Troopers kill him? See, if I did something like, say, make it to where the rebels get their weapons through a mysterious black market, then I might have to actually flesh out the market, the criminals that run it, and the entire criminal underworld of the setting. This is bad because this might lead to an entire story arc in the criminal underbelly of the evil empire that showcases the corruption and greed that drives the rebellion in the first place. The poor main characters might even be brought out of their comfort zone and forced to bargain with organized crime syndicates just to keep the rebellion supplied, while having to risk said criminals turning on them. Maybe even resolve a personal plotline of one of the roguish supporting characters' checkered past while we are at it. What a disaster that arc would be. Narrative tension and personal stakes? Layered world building? Can't have any of that. Back to a cookie-cutter MacGuffin race and or evil empire superweapon plot. Besides, that story arc has one fatal flaw. There is no need for the rebels to remain supplied in the first place, because it's the main characters that will do all of the work anyway. Remember, overconfidence is never a weakness, but faith in your friends totally is. Yeah, that sounds like something the good guy would say. And it is all about being the good guys. Americans are particularly fond of the rebels versus evil empire story, as it has become mythologized in our culture. That gives any writer a free pass to write about rebellions and revolutions uncritically, even to the point to trying to frame every contentious subject in real life as a rebels versus evil empire narrative, no matter how glaringly stupid it is. Even writers who want a simple story about good guy underdog rebels versus evil empire baddies are completely free to turn the rebels into murdering edgy torture fetishists, and should never use their critical thinking skills to examine why the evil empire somehow has more fans. I mean, why would people root for the evil empire even though they've never been shown to do anything all that bad, have snazzy uniforms, cool weapons, and are all portrayed by classically trained actors with tremendous screen presence? Clearly, people are going to root for the rebels with their focus group design lack of personality and absolutely no compelling hook, quirk, or design. Now, what happens when the rebels finally win? You see, that's the funny thing. They don't! At least not if the story becomes a franchise. See, it turns out that building or rebuilding a government after a collapse is like really hard, especially when it comes to democracies. So while world building the complex social, economic, and political changes a successful rebellion turned revolution would entail is extremely difficult, resetting the franchise back to status quo is not. No matter how many victories, no matter how many times the evil emperor is killed, no matter how many imperial armies crushed, superweapons destroyed, or generals assassinated, the franchise will always be reset back to its money-making default. The rebels will always fight the evil empire forever. Hey, it's not a revolution until it revolves back around to where it started.
Nice, nifty, Nigel, Niger, Nigeria. I've never seen this word before. I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
Why don't you try spelling it out?
Okay. N-I-G-E-R-I-A.
Oh, by the spear of destiny, this is taking too long. We'll never find the forbidden naughty word by going through the dictionary one at a freaking time.
Well, how else are we gonna stop the sponsorship wars? If we can say the forbidden naughty word, then no one will advertise on this channel.
Look, you say that word, one of two things will happen. Either YouTube will annihilate the entire TWA expanded universe to save its own skin from controversy, or an angry internet mob will try to cancel us.
Exactly. We want to cancel the sponsorship wars.
Back in my day, cancel meant that something was actually canceled. Now it just means that everyone argues semantics on the internet while inadvertently driving traffic to the very thing they are ostensibly trying to make vanish. The whole thing is a giant waste of time. Canceling only works if the person being canceled has a sense of shame. And good luck getting JP I've already monetized my apology video Beaubien to fill anything close to the concept of shame. Even if we say the taboo word, and even if some sponsors flee the channel, there will always be someone without scruples who will purchase ads here. This plan either dooms us all or backfires at best. That is a good point, Sir New Guy. What do you suggest? You have a freaking sword. Go find who the source of the sponsor is
and give them a stern warning. That's brilliant, Sir New Guy. None can withstand the withering assault of a good stern warning.
Commander, I think the new guy is saying that violence may be necessary for the protection of the TWA expanded universe. We must be ready to fight.
We must gather our forces then. But where will we march?
I just happened to stumble upon some key intelligence thanks to this video's sponsor, Campfire Blaze. Campfire Blaze is a browser-based writing organizational tool to help aspiring authors, dungeon masters, and people who are most definitely not spies from the ancient conspiracy to keep their plots straight. Thanks to Campfire Blaze, I now have all the tools I need to organize my plot with timelines to help visualize the plot's flow and avoid working at cross purposes, which happens all the time to me because of the complexity of my plots. It has a host of other tools like a word processor, character sheets, character arcs, relationship details, and even tools to flesh out magic systems, languages, and artifacts that allow for an entire series Bible to be constructed. Multiple conspirators, users can even collaborate on projects in real time for cooperative tabletop projects, fan works, or multi-author books. Try the free version or build your own subscription by choosing only the modules you need by going to bit.ly/TWA3-21. TWA fans can also use the coupon code TWA21 at checkout to receive 20% off all lifetime purchases of Blaze modules. Link is in the description below. Wow, your intelligence report sounds an awful lot like a sponsored segment. Well, you see, I need to go through all that so the check clears.
What?
Look, all the TWA expanded universe factions are gathering to storm Megacorp's vaults to seize the source of the sponsors. We just have to get there first.
I see. Then we must gather our most elite forces. We must mobilize the Ad Block Force.